In 2016, on the dry mountain slopes of the Sahara Desert, a group of German engineers implemented a project that until very recently seemed impossible. They installed giant mesh constructions, massive frames, each more than 6 meters high, designed to capture moisture directly from the air. At an altitude of over 2,000 meters above sea level, the tiniest droplets of fog settled on these nets. Gradually, they connected with one another, turning into thin streams of cool drinking water. What was once considered an unattainable luxury for this arid land suddenly became reality. But what made German engineers travel to Africa, cross continents, and hang nets right on the mountain slopes? And how can a simple, at first glance, net turn fog into a real source of water? Let's figure this out together. For decades, the anti-Atlas region in southern Morocco remained almost completely out of sight. It found itself squeezed between the dry winds of the Sahara Desert, in a place where rains fall only a few times a year, and the dry season can last hundreds of days in a row without a single drop of precipitation. Groundwater resources here are rapidly being depleted. The few wells that still exist contain salty water with a high concentration of minerals, unfit for human consumption. About 60% of local residents do not have running water in their homes. Every morning, women and children are forced to walk several kilometers along rocky slopes in order to bring home only a few canisters of water from the valley below. Water in this region has become a heavy burden not only for everyday life, but also for education, healthcare, and agriculture. The paradox is that early in the morning, these mountains are often covered by thick fog coming from the Atlantic Ocean. It creeps along the slopes, wraps around the peaks, and fills all the space around. However, after just a few hours, the fog disappears without a trace, leaving people not a single drop of water, wasted, as if it had never been here at all. It was precisely this contrast that became the starting point for the German Water Foundation. Together with local engineers, they decided to bring a bold idea to life, to learn how to extract water from fog. The project was named CloudFisher, which translates as cloud catcher. CloudFisher is a system designed to capture and condense moisture from the air and then turn it into polnocennu pityevu vodu, fully fledged drinking water. The development was created by the German Water Foundation in collaboration with industrial designer Peter Trautwein in Munich. The technology is based on using a hidden source of water, moisture contained in fog. This is a resource most people do not even think about, despite the fact that it is constantly present in the air. The first step for the German specialists was a trip to Morocco and a detailed study of the real conditions at the future project site. During expeditions, the engineers noticed that areas located near the Atlantic Ocean and the Atlas Mountains are regularly enveloped in dense morning fog. In the course of field research, they observed abundant growth of moss on stones and tree trunks, a clear sign of high air humidity. Further analysis showed that the fog in this region contains a significant amount of water vapor. This moisture can be captured and converted into clean water suitable for drinking. After this discovery, the German team, together with local communities, chose the optimal location and began implementing a pilot project. For 18 months, the team tested various types of mesh materials. In the end, a special three-dimensional mesh was chosen, which showed the highest efficiency in collecting moisture from fog. These meshes were installed on strong steel frames, forming real walls on the mountain slopes to catch fog. The CloudFisher system is a giant mesh construction, as if floating in the air, through which the humid Atlantic winds drive fog along the slopes of the anti-Atlas mountains. Fragment: start of construction. After a thorough analysis of the terrain and wind directions, the German engineers began preparing the site for installing the fog collection system. For the heavy earthworks, local workers were hired, people well acquainted with the harsh soil, rocky ground, and extreme climatic conditions of the region. Large pits, almost 1 meter deep, were dug in the ground. It was in them that steel support poles were installed, which were to become the foundation of the entire structure. These fastening points played a key role because they were the ones that held the mesh panels in place, resisting powerful winds that regularly blow in from the Atlantic Ocean. On the uneven rocky slope, engineers and villagers step by step lifted heavy elements of the steel frame to the installation site. Each part had to be carried by hand, carefully moving upward along the slope, while cold ocean winds intensified the feeling of height and open space. When the next support was raised into a vertical position, several people held it, preventing the structure from tilting, while the others at that time fixed the connections, tightened the bolts, and secured the frame directly into the hard mountain rock. Everything was done with the expectation that the system would withstand sharp gusts of wind and would not lose stability over time. Higher up the slope, workers wearing safety harnesses climbed ladders and hung above the ground, stretching three-dimensional mesh panels across the entire width of the metal frame. Each panel was fastened by hand, and each thread was carefully aligned in order to form a single massive wall for catching fog on the mountain peak. Thus, step by step, an unusual construction appeared on the slope, a huge mesh barrier as if floating in the air and intercepting the fog that the ocean winds brought every day. At the core of CloudFisher is a double layer of three-dimensional mesh made of ultra-strong polyethylene. This material is resistant to ultraviolet radiation, corrosion, and sharp temperature changes between a hot day and a cold night. Two layers of mesh are stretched parallel to each other, forming millions of microscopic gaps. It is in these spaces that the tiniest fog droplets are trapped, colliding with the fibers as air flows past through the construction. When the mesh catches fog, it is important not to lose a single drop of water. For this, special water-collecting gutters are installed under the construction. Technicians lift V-shaped composite elements, fix them under the mesh, and securely fasten them using metal hooks and bolts. Each connection is carefully checked so that condensed moisture flows strictly into the gutter and then is directed into a collection pipe. All fastening points are additionally checked and tightened again so that the system does not shift even in strong gusts of wind. Each CloudFisher module is an autonomous construction. All elements are assembled with a minimal set of tools. The system does not require electricity, fuel, or complex equipment. There is no noise, no emissions, only wind, fog, and the force of gravity. It is precisely this simplicity that makes CloudFisher one of the most sustainable and eco-friendly water extraction technologies in the world. It is ideal for remote arid regions where drilling wells or building dams is practically impossible. From afar, the nets resemble white sails in a sea of sand. They fill with wind and as if silently catch water prямо из воздуха, directly from the air. The operating principle of the system is both simple and refined to perfection. When the wind carries fog through the three-dimensional mesh panels, the tiniest droplets of moisture collide with the cool surface of the fibers and begin to condense. At first, tiny sparkling droplets appear on the mesh. As they accumulate, they merge into larger drops, which under the force of gravity and the tilt of the construction begin to slowly flow downward. As a result, water falls into the gutter installed parallel to the ground. From the gutter, the water is directed through a sealed system of plastic pipes into a central reservoir located hundreds of meters away, and sometimes several kilometers from the installation site. Thus, an elegant and sustainable cycle is completed. Fog turns into water and water into life. On average, a system consisting of about 10 CloudFisher panels is capable of collecting from 600 to 1,000 liters of water per day. This is enough to fully provide an entire village with water, even in the hottest and driest months, when the temperature rises above 40 degrees and the sky remains completely cloudless. Even under such conditions, CloudFisher continues to capture clear drops of moisture, providing clean water to thousands of people living in the conditions of a scorching desert. According to local residents, previously they had to spend from 3 to 4 hours every day just to collect about 20 to 25 liters of water. That barely sufficed for the basic needs of one family. Long walks, heavy canisters, and constant water scarcity became part of everyday reality. With the appearance of the CloudFisher system, life in these villages changed radically. Now, residents simply open the tap and get water for cooking, washing, bathing, and even watering plants. What quite recently seemed impossible in desert conditions became a pravichny chastu byta, an ordinary part of daily life. However, fog water is not entirely free. The German team turned the project into a sustainable economic model. Residents pay for water depending on the volume of consumption, by the same principle as in ordinary water supply systems. The more water is used, the higher the cost. On average, the price ranges from $1.20 to $1.50 per cubic meter. This approach helps avoid wastefulness and forms a responsible attitude toward water as the most valuable resource in conditions of extreme drought. For people from the poorest segments of the population who cannot afford even minimal payment, reality remains harsh. Every day they are forced to walk almost 3 miles to reach rivers outside the mountainous areas of Morocco. There, far from civilization, they spend hours scooping polluted water from hand-dug pits, fully understanding that it is unsafe. But they have no other choice. It is the only source of water for many kilometers around. Heavy canisters weighing almost 20 kilograms they carry on their backs, slowly and with effort, making their way home in order to somehow provide their families with water. From the spring of 2016 until the end of 2018, the German team completed the construction of the largest fog collection system in the world. This large-scale complex was placed in Morocco and included more than 1,090 square meters of three-dimensional mesh. The project began providing clean water to 15 villages, 1,250 people, and 1 school. In addition, the system supports agriculture in the region and supplies water to about 7,000 head of livestock. To date, 31 CloudFisher systems have been installed. All of them are connected to each other by a network of pipelines, with a total length of 26 kilometers and 5 storage reservoirs, with a total capacity of almost 1,000 cubic meters of water. On average, each square meter of mesh collects about 22 liters of water per year. Altogether, all 31 installations are capable of producing more than 36,000 liters of water ежедневно, daily, which is tens of millions of liters of clean water per year. Because if in Europe they learned how to extract water from the air, then in China they went even further. There, they do not just use the desert, they turn entire parts of it into green landscapes. For centuries, northern China lived next to an invisible enemy, sand. Every time monsoon winds crashed in from the Gobi and Taklamakan deserts, powerful dust storms covered Beijing, turning day into night. By the 1990s, there were years when residents of the capital had to wear masks more than 80 days a year so as not to inhale the finest dust brought from the desert. The extreme climate of northern China, intensified by massovые вырубки лесов, mass deforestation, excessive grazing, and uncontrolled extraction of groundwater, gradually depleted soils and destroyed vegetation cover. As a result, these processes opened the way for uncontrolled desert expansion, which year after year moved ever farther to the north and east of the country. Sand swallowed fields, villages, and roads, turning fertile lands into barren areas. For China, this became not just an environmental problem, but a direct threat to the economy, public health, and food security. Faced with the growing threat of desertification, China decided not to retreat. In 1978, the country's government launched a massive program, рассчитанную на целое столетие, designed for an entire century. It was called the 3 North Shelter Forest Program and became known to the whole world as the Green Great Wall. This is not a single forest strip and not a monolithic line of trees. The project is a huge system of thousands of forest areas, windbreak belts, and artificial lakes, stretching more than 4,500 kilometers, from the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region to Heilongjiang Province. The main task of the program is to plant 35 million hectares of new forests by 2050. Over the decades of implementing the project, the country's forest cover has already increased from 10% in 1949 to more than 25% today. This project is considered the largest man-made structure ever created by humans on land. It is built not from concrete and steel, but from perseverance, long-term planning, and the green color of life. It is here that humanity's dream of reviving dead lands began turning into reality. A logical question arises. What exactly did Chinese engineers do within this multi-billion program? The answer is surprising. They began not with heavy machinery and not with massive construction, but with precise calculations and careful analysis. In the territory of the Taklamakan Desert, specialists carried out a detailed study of the area. Using satellite images and drones, they studied the movement of sand dunes and the wind directions that shape the desert's relief. Based on these data, a system of straw grids was developed, laid diagonally pram pasok, directly on the sand. Each square of such a grid had dimensions of approximately 6 by 6 meters. Across the entire territory of Western China, straw was laid out in strict geometric patterns. From a bird's-eye view, the desert began to resemble a giant chessboard of golden squares stretching beyond the horizon. However, behind this simple picture, there was a colossal engineering operation. Millions of tons of straw were delivered hundreds of kilometers deep into the desert, where vehicles often got stuck in soft sand, and paved roads simply did not exist. On site, thousands of workers began by digging shallow trenches, into which bundles of straw were placed by hand, strictly according to the Zaydenay-Setke specified grid. All of this took place under a blazing sun, at temperatures exceeding 49 degrees Celsius, without shade and without shelter. Every movement in such conditions turned into a struggle against heat and exhaustion. But despite this, the workers continued to labor, because each square of the straw grid was not just a barrier for sand, but the foundation for the return of life. Interwoven straw stabilized mobile dunes, slowed wind speed, and created microzones in which moisture could be retained long enough for the greening process to begin. After laying the grids, machinery entered the work. Mechanical augers and planting machines drilled small holes in the center of each square, preparing the ground for planting drought-resistant plants. After preparing the straw grids, the next stage began in the center of each square: planting. Specially selected drought-resistant species capable of surviving in the extreme conditions of the desert were planted into the pre-drilled holes. Among them were saxaul, desert poplar, and red willow, plants with powerful root systems adapted to heat and lack of moisture. The seedlings were grown in nurseries long before transportation into the desert. When they were delivered to the site, workers carefully placed each plant in the center of the straw cell, checking the position so that the fragile roots sat slightly below the surface, where the slow salome layer of straw protected them from the scorching sun and the constant movement of sand. After that, a strictly calculated amount of water was added to each hole, and the soil around the roots was compacted by hand. This allowed the root system to come into tight contact with a Boli Vlajnym Sloem Pescar, more humid layer of sand, and gave the seedlings a chance to zakrapitsa, take hold, in the first, most critical weeks. This is only the beginning of the story. Water extracted from the air and forests grown on sand show what the combination of human will, engineering thought, and science is capable of. The world changes not only in megapolises, megacities, it changes where emptiness once ruled. See you in the next episode of VDTeam, where every story opens a news-glad view of human possibilities and the power of technology.